Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to see you all here today. So, in past weeks, we've been discussing the guide, The Way of the Bodhisattva, The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva, an 8th century Indian Buddhist practitioner and scholar. And last week, we were discussing the chapter on patience. And this week, we'll be discussing the next chapter, which is on diligence, which might be considered a counterbalance to the virtue of patience, but we'll discuss that in a minute. But first of all, I'd like to just tell you about a personal event that occurred during the past week, because I think it lends itself to the application of some of these virtues these concepts we're talking about: aspiration to be of benefit to all beings, patience, diligence, which we'll be getting into. So the story is, I'll try to make this relatively brief, is that on Tuesday, Carol went out to the garage to get in the car to get going on a trip she was taking, and the car just was completely dead. It would not start in any way. It's a plug-in hybrid vehicle. And 3 months ago, we had a similar experience, but at that time, the 12-volt battery, not the major drive battery, but the 12-volt battery that's incorporated in these vehicles, had given out after 5 years, which is not unexpected. We had the battery replaced, but we couldn't go to the local dealer because he didn't have a battery in stock. They're kind of specialized batteries for these vehicles. We went to a more distant dealership because they did have a battery in stock, and they took care of replacing the battery. So I was somewhat surprised when it looked like the battery was again shot after only less than 3 months. So try as I might through charging the battery, etc., I was unable to resolve the problem, so the car was towed. Except we couldn't tow it to the close dealer because the close dealer told us that, well, if the battery was put in by this more distant dealer, you'll have to go there. So we had it towed out to the more distant site to replace the battery. And it involved all kinds of diagnostic tests and various things that were done to check the vehicle and see why this was happening. And in short, the total bill came up to close to $800 at this dealership. And I ask, well, isn't the battery that was placed under warranty, and shouldn't that cover at least part of this? And they said, well, no, because we found a GPS tracker on your vehicle that was apparently installed by the dealer that sold you the vehicle. And that was the cause of the battery essentially discharging, because these GPS trackers take a certain amount of electricity 24/7. In any case, the car is now functioning and works, but I'm left with this dissatisfaction of the of the rather large bill for this replacement battery after only 3 months. And I was told I would need to go to the dealer who sold us the car and placed the GPS tracker that we didn't know about and weren't informed about in order to receive compensation for this. And I'm in the process of getting ready to do that. But the whole thing, I mean, I'm sure all of you in one way or another have had similar experiences, either with cars or other appliances or other conditions in life. So pursuing this, I put together a sort of a fact sheet about the whole sequence of events and various documents that are relevant. And I do intend to be diligent about trying to achieve some sort of satisfactory resolution to this problem. But how does the Dharma, how do the Buddha's teachings, how do these teachings of Shantideva, reflecting the Buddha's teachings, how do they apply in a situation like this? And thinking about that, I thought, well, there's nothing wrong with pursuing the matter. It's not necessary. Patience doesn't mean just accepting whatever comes and not doing anything about it. On the other hand, Shantideva spent a lot of time talking about the adverse effects associated with ill will and not bearing ill will toward anyone. So the art here comes in pursuing the matter without personalizing it, without bearing ill will toward anyone. And Shantideva had given us a couple maneuvers, mental maneuvers, to achieve this. One being that you don't really know what other people's motivations are. They might be acting perfectly sincerely based on their view of the reality of the situation. On the other hand, if they are operating out of conscious deceit, that's sort of their problem. That's their karma, not yours. And you can, in a sense, pity them and try to, as you can, relieve them of their misconceptions and of their deceit, so that they will be better off and you will as well. It's an artful balance, I think. But that sort of thing comes up a lot. And I thought, just sharing this little story might bring to mind similar situations that you've encountered and how you've dealt with them. And it also relates to a topic that came up during discussion after the talk last week, the notion of having an agenda and how going into a interaction with someone, having an agenda could be problematic. On the other hand, if you have no agenda whatsoever, you're sort of directionless. And how we use the word agenda in various ways. An agenda is the Latin etymology of the word is things to be done. It's kind of neutral. Things to be done. These are things to be done. And we talked about how trying to force an outcome on a situation can be a problem. But I think here, agenda, of course, has these dual sort of nuanced meanings. but it brings up the importance of the concept of mindfulness. Because having some sort of direction that you're intending is, I mean, all living creatures have this. Even the ants trying to get into our kitchen have an agenda. All living creatures have an agenda. But mindfulness about one's agenda, things that you're trying to do, even if the agenda is trying to be of benefit to all beings, during the course of the interaction, mindfulness of that and of the consequences that seem to be arising, the response you seem to be getting, is critical. Because sometimes, even with the best intent, as we know, trying to be of benefit to somebody can backfire. We aren't always accurate up front about what others may need. So I think the notion of agenda and the notion of diligence versus patience, these things can be helpful. So getting back to this chapter on diligence. Now, diligence can be translated in various ways. It comes from the Sanskrit word virya, which literally means manliness. It can sometimes be translated as zeal or enthusiasm, energy. And in Sanskrit, as in English, many of these virtues that we talk about are virtue also coming from the same virya, are genderized. But it's important to see through that because clearly diligence and patience are important regardless of gender. Someone who is patient without any diligence, without any energy or zeal or enthusiasm, is ineffective, whereas someone who is diligent without patience is dangerous. So regardless of gender, all of this applies. One can view it as, sort of the genderized notion of yin and yang. Yin being corresponding here to patience and yang corresponding to diligence. But I would encourage you to ignore the genderized notions and just think about the virtues as they stand. So I'll start with this chapter on diligence, which follows immediately upon the chapter about patience. We'll see how far we get. Thus, with patience, I will strive with diligence. For in such diligence, enlightenment is found. If no wind blows, then nothing stirs, and neither is there merit without diligence. Diligence means joy in virtuous ways. Its contraries have been defined as laziness, an inclination for unwholesomeness, defeatism, and self-contempt, a taste for idle pleasure and a craving for repose and sleep, no qualms about the sorrows of samsara. Laziness, indeed, is born from these. So do not be downcast, he continues on a little later, but marshal all your powers. Make an effort. Be the master of yourself. Practice the equality of self and others. Practice the exchange of self and others. He goes on to these two equality of self and others and exchange of self and other in the next chapter, which we'll get to. Oh, but how could I become enlightened? Don't excuse yourself with such despondency. Oh, but how could I become enlightened? Don't excuse yourself with such despondency. The Buddha, who declares the truth, has truly spoken and proclaimed that if they bring forth strength of perseverance, even bees and flies and gnats and grubs will gain supreme enlightenment, so hard to find. So he's a lot of this chapter is has the tone of kind of a pep talk for the author and for the reader alike. The forces that secure the good of beings are aspiration, steadfastness, relinquishment, and joy. Aspiration grows through fear of suffering and contemplation of the benefits to be attained. Therefore, leaving everything that is adverse to it, I will labor to increase my diligence through aspiration and self-confidence, relinquishment and joy, by strength of earnest application and exertion of control. Joy is mentioned several times in this chapter. The implication being that diligence in the pursuit of the Bodhisattva way, in the pursuit of awakening for the benefit of all beings, is a joyous activity, or can be a joyous activity. That it's part of it. It need not be just grinding away. But let me first consider my reserves to start or not to start accordingly. It might be better not to start, but once begun, I should not then withdraw. Action, the afflictions, and ability, three things to which my pride should be directed. I will do this, I myself alone. These words define my pride of action. So I'd like to talk a little bit about pride here, because he gets into, as he goes on a little farther, the use of pride in two different ways. And I think in English, we also use the word pride in two different ways. It can signal arrogance or conceit, or you can be talking about pride of workmanship, doing your best with whatever task that you have been assigned or whatever task you have taken on. So pride can have both a positive and negative connotation. And in this chapter, the root word for pride, which is used in various compounds in the Sanskrit, is it'll come to me. it's anyway, the root word in the Sanskrit is used in two different ways as well. There is both a positive and negative connotation, and translators in struggling with this, at least this particular translation, just uses two different words or sets of words. They use the negative connotation being arrogance or conceit, and the positive connotation being self-confidence or even faith in oneself. Faith in the ability to do the task at hand. And that is reflected in this next passage that I'll read. I will be victor over all, and nothing shall prevail and bring me down. The offspring of the lion, the conqueror, should constantly abide in this self-confidence. The offspring of the lion, basically being a child of the Buddha, as they say, or just being a follower or someone who aspires to the kind of life that the Buddha would advocate. Those whom arrogance destroys are thus defiled. They lack self-confidence. Again, contrasting these two shades of meaning in the word pride. Those who arrogance destroys are thus defiled. They lack self-confidence. Those who have true confidence escape the foe, while others fall into the power of an evil pride. So I think I'll stop there. There is more to this chapter that we'll get to next time. But I would be interested in your thoughts about this notion of diligence, energy, applying energy, and how patience, which entails mindfulness, might counterbalance energy and diligence and an agenda in our day-to-day interactions. So thank you for listening today, and we'll go into breakout rooms, and I'll be seeing you back in a few moments.